Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we're diving into something really fascinating. We are uncovering the deeply human reality that so often gets completely buried underneath cold, hard economic statistics. We're going to bypass the usual surface-level metrics you constantly hear on the news, and we're going to break down the specific structural disconnect between human potential and economic opportunity. By the end of this, I promise you, you're going to see the modern workforce and the systemic barriers built into it in a completely different light.
Section 1. Beyond the economic numbers. Okay, let's jump right in. Usually when we talk about the economy, we're looking at things from 1,000 feet up, right? We hear these massive quarterly reports boasting about millions of jobs created, or maybe the panicked headlines about millions of jobs lost. It's all aggregates, averages, and these sweeping, massive trends. We track these massive demographic shifts, reading about millions of young people entering the workforce every single year, totally shifting the global labor supply.
We quantify millions of people actively seeking new opportunities, millions upon millions. And honestly, when you only consume data at that high of an altitude, it all just becomes a blur. It turns into this endless, completely faceless crowd of data points on a chart, totally disconnected from the actual lived reality on the ground.
Section 2. The human behind the data. So what happens if we force ourselves to stop looking at the crowd? Let's make a hard pivot away from that macro data and zoom all the way in on just one single individual who is usually hidden behind those charts. Because under all those statistical decimal points, there is a real person asking a deeply human question, a question that standard economic metrics just aren't built to measure. They're asking, can I build a life in which I feel capable, independent, and significant? Wow, that is incredibly profound when you really unpack it. People aren't just looking to scrape by, they want agency. They're looking for environments where their unique skills actually matter, where they can achieve true independence, and maybe most importantly, where their contributions hold real significance. When an economy only optimizes for efficiency and raw output, it completely ignores this need for human significance. And understanding this desire for basic economic dignity, well, that is the ultimate key to understanding a massive structural failure we're dealing with today.
Which brings us to Section 3, redefining the lost generation.
Now, what's really interesting here is how this forces us to rethink everything we assume about this group. Look, when you hear the phrase lost generation, it usually has a ton of negative baggage, right? Our knee-jerk reaction as a society is to blame the people, to assume there's something wrong with them. But the source material gives us a radically different data-backed definition. It defines this group as a generation whose talent has not yet found its economic pathway. Catch that crucial distinction? The talent absolutely exists. It's the pathway that's completely broken or just missing entirely. Our traditional systems, the rigid credentialing, automated hiring algorithms, traditional corporate onboarding, they've become so incredibly exclusionary, they're acting like walls instead of doors. Framing the issue like this takes the blame off the individual and puts it exactly where it belongs, squarely on the structural design of our economic systems.
Let's systematically bust some myths here, because the data completely wrecks the popular narrative. These individuals are not without education. In fact, a lot of the cohorts in this group are actually part of the most formally educated generations in human history. They are not without talent. We're seeing unbelievable creativity and adaptability out there, especially in the decentralized or informal economies. And they are absolutely not unwilling to work. Just look at the sheer relentless hustle it takes to survive in the gig economy today. The core problem here is simply not a lack of effort or raw material. And this brilliantly illustrates the real gap we are facing. It's a massive systemic mismatch. On one side, you have individuals showing up with incredible education, fierce ambition, and serious capability. But on the other side, they find themselves structurally blocked from actually getting stable employment, upward opportunity, and meaningful work. They are trapped in this agonizing economic purgatory. They did literally everything society asked them to do to prepare, but the bridge connecting that preparation to the actual job market, it basically collapsed. The friction costs in our labor market, meaning just how incredibly hard it is to match a great worker with the right role, have gotten so insanely high that huge amounts of human capability are just left stranded.
Section 4. The pathway to Revitalex.
To figure out how we fix this, we have to look at what this missing pathway actually looks like in the real world. Because this economic purgatory happens in a few different ways. First, you've got the completely unemployed. These folks are totally locked out of the system, a lot of times just filtered out by some AI resume scanner before a human even glances at their name. Second, and this one's maybe even more insidious, is the massive wave of the underemployed. We are seeing staggering numbers of recent grads pushed into jobs that literally require zero higher education or specialized skills. Their skills just sit there atrophying, and their wages completely stagnate. And third, you have people who are technically employed, but they're trapped in roles that offer zero growth, no equity ownership, no real job security, and honestly, no fundamental dignity. Think about precarious contract work or zero-hour shifts. Sure, they get a paycheck, but they have absolutely no path to that capability, independence, and significance we talked about earlier. So let's summarize the core tragedy here before we move on, because this is huge. The talent is there. The economic pathway is missing. Right now, we are sitting on this massive, unparalleled goldmine of human potential just waiting to be tapped. But our legacy systems, the outdated degree requirements, inflexible corporate training budgets, totally rigid entry-level expectations, they're completely blocking that raw, eager talent from connecting with real economic opportunity. There is a fierce, absolute urgency to build a brand new architecture that bridges this structural gap.
So the crucial point is that this specific gaping structural void is exactly where the idea of RevitalX becomes incredibly powerful. Once we realize the problem isn't the people but the pathway, RevitalX steps in as the actual architectural blueprint for that missing bridge. Based on our source material, RevitalX isn't just some vague concept. It's a comprehensive, three-pronged economic framework designed to completely bypass all that friction in the traditional labor market. First up, it brings in a system of decentralized, verifiable micro-credentialing. So instead of forcing someone to spend 4 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to prove they're smart with a traditional degree, RevitalX uses rapid, project-based assessments. You prove your capability directly to an employer in real time. It completely shifts the hiring metric from time in a seat to verified proof of capability. Second, RevitalX fundamentally flips employer risk on its head. Look, a big reason companies avoid untraditional talent is the high cost of onboarding and training them. The RevitalX framework fixes this by introducing targeted, localized incentives and subsidized director role apprenticeships. This means companies actually get financially rewarded for taking on raw ambition and training it internally, instead of fighting in a zero-sum game for the same small pool of pre-trained legacy candidates. And third, it bakes equity and continuous upskilling into the employment contract from day one. It turns a basic transactional job into a real, continuous pathway for growth, directly fulfilling that deeply human need for significance and independence. It basically rewires the whole corporate incentive structure to view human capital development not as a sunk cost, but as the primary driver of enterprise value. It is literally the exact economic pathway this generation has been missing.
Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought to consider today. Are our current economic pathways actually serving human dignity? And is a framework like RevitalX the bridge this generation so desperately needs to cross from raw ambition to true opportunity? Next time you look at the economic systems operating all around you, ask yourself, who is being filtered out by these old rules? And what incredible things could we achieve if we finally built the pathways to let them in? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep exploring the mechanics of how we structure opportunity, and I'll catch you next time as we continue to break down the most fascinating ideas shaping our world.